Don't interfere. The words cut through the cold night air like a quiet warning no one wanted to challenge. And for a moment, the entire street seemed to hold its breath as a black SUV idled under a flickering streetlight, its engine humming low, steady, patient, like it had done this before. A woman in a tailored coat struggled just enough to show she wasn't supposed to be there, her voice controlled but edged with something sharper than fear, something like disbelief that this was happening to her, here, in a place where power usually protected people like her. "You don't understand who I am," she said, her tone firm, practiced, the kind of voice that had closed million-dollar deals and silenced boardrooms. One of the men near the vehicle chuckled under his breath, not cruel, just certain. "Doesn't matter tonight." Across the street, under the dim glow of a failing neon sign, Ethan Cole stood still, one hand resting loosely at his side, the other gripping a worn paper bag with a half-eaten sandwich inside. He had just finished a late shift, the kind that left your back sore and your thoughts quiet, the kind where you walked home without expecting anything to change. His jacket was faded, his boots scuffed, the kind of man most people passed without a second glance. He watched, not with panic, not with confusion, just watched. A passing car slowed for a second, then kept moving. A couple on the corner turned away, pretending not to see. The world had already decided this wasn't their problem. Ethan exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cool air, and for a brief second, it looked like he might do the same. Lower his gaze, keep walking, let the night swallow the moment like it swallowed everything else. "Please," the woman said again, quieter now, not begging, but asking the world one last time to recognize her. No one answered. Ethan shifted his weight. One step forward, then another. The paper bag crumpled softly in his hand as he let it fall onto the pavement without looking back. "You should let her go," he said, his voice calm, almost gentle, the kind of tone that didn't belong in a moment like this. One of the men turned, surprised more than threatened, his eyes scanning Ethan quickly, measuring him, dismissing him. "Walk away," he replied flatly. "This isn't your business." Ethan nodded once, as if he understood, as if he agreed. The streetlight flickered again, casting brief shadows across his face, revealing nothing but stillness, the kind that didn't need attention. "You're right," Ethan said quietly. "It's not." A pause. The air tightened. Even the hum of the engine seemed to lower, as if listening. Then he added, just as softly, "But it is my choice." And in that single moment, something shifted, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to change the direction of everything that would follow, though no one standing there could yet understand why the man they had already overlooked would be the one they would never forget. The man did not raise his voice. He did not rush forward. He simply stood there, steady, as if the night itself had decided to pause around him, and that alone was enough to confuse the rhythm of everything unfolding. The man near the vehicle glanced back at the others, a quick look, silent, questioning. "You hear him?" One muttered. "Yeah." Another replied, shrugging slightly, "Just ignore it." The woman's eyes shifted, just for a moment, landing on Ethan, searching, measuring, trying to understand why a stranger would step into a situation that everyone else had already chosen to avoid. "You should go," she said, her voice quieter now, not commanding, but almost protective. "This is not your problem." Ethan met her gaze for the first time, and there was something in his eyes that did not match the moment. Not fear, not hesitation, just a calm that felt older than the street, older than the tension pressing into the air. "I know," he said. A beat passed. The wind moved lightly down the block, brushing against loose papers near the curb, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic. "Then leave," one of the men said, more firmly this time, taking a step forward, not aggressive, but certain, like someone used to being obeyed. Ethan tilted his head slightly, as if considering the suggestion, as if weighing something invisible. "I was on my way home," he said, almost casually. "Long shift. My daughter is probably still awake, pretending she is not tired." The words did not fit the moment, and yet they landed with a strange weight, soft, human, real. One of the men scoffed. "That has nothing to do with this." Ethan nodded again, slow. "Understanding. It has everything to do with it." The woman blinked, something in her expression shifting, the first crack in her controlled composure. "Why?" she asked, barely above a whisper now. Ethan looked down briefly, then back up, as if the answer was simple, as if it had always been there. Because I would want someone to stand still instead of walking away, he said. Silence followed. Not complete, not empty, but full, like the air before rain. The men exchanged another glance, less certain this time. Something had changed, not in position, not in numbers, but in presence. Ethan took one more step forward, not fast, not threatening, just enough to close the distance by a single pace. We do not have to make this harder than it already is, he said calmly. The man closest to him frowned, studying him more carefully now, noticing the way Ethan stood, the way his shoulders rested, the way his hands remained relaxed but ready, not clenched, not tense, just prepared. You some kind of hero? He asked, a hint of sarcasm slipping through. Ethan shook his head gently. No, another pause. Then, with the same quiet certainty, he added, I am just a father. The words settled heavier than anything else that had been said, and for the first time that night, the balance of the moment shifted in a way no one could fully explain, as if something unseen had stepped into the space between them, steady, unmovable, and quietly in control. The man closest to Ethan shifted his stance, subtle but telling, like someone recalibrating a situation that no longer felt as simple as it had a moment ago. You talk a lot for someone who should not be here, he said, though the edge in his voice had softened, replaced by something closer to caution than control. Ethan did not respond immediately. He looked past them, just briefly, as if mapping the space without making it obvious, the parked cars, the narrow stretch of sidewalk, the flicker of light that came and went every few seconds. Then he returned his attention to the man in front of him, calm as ever. I am not here to argue, he said. I am here to make sure she gets to walk away. A short laugh came from the side, but it did not carry the same confidence as before. That is not your call, another voice added, though it sounded thinner now, like it was trying to hold on to something that was already slipping. The woman remained still, her breathing more controlled now, her eyes moving between Ethan and the men, reassessing everything she thought she understood about power, about control, about who actually held it in a moment like this. You really think you can change this? She asked quietly, not mocking, not doubting, just asking. Ethan considered her question for a second, his gaze steady. I think moments change when someone decides they should, he replied. The air tightened again, but differently this time, less like a threat, more like a decision waiting to be made. One of the men glanced toward the vehicle, then back at Ethan, as if calculating time, risk, outcome. This is not worth it, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for the others to hear. We are wasting time. The first man hesitated, his jaw tightening, his certainty no longer complete. He looked at Ethan again, longer this time, noticing details he had ignored before, the way Ethan stood balanced, the quiet confidence that did not ask for attention, the kind that did not bluff. You are making this complicated, he said. Ethan gave a small, almost sympathetic nod. No, he answered gently. I am making it simple. A pause followed, longer than any before it. The streetlight flickered again, and in that brief dimming of light, something shifted completely. The man exhaled sharply, then stepped back half a pace, just enough to break the invisible line that had been holding everything in place. Fine, he said, not loudly, not dramatically, just done. This is not worth the trouble. Another man opened the vehicle door, then closed it again without getting in. No one rushed. No one argued. The tension did not explode. It dissolved, quietly, almost respectfully, like a storm that decided not to arrive. Within seconds, the movement reversed, subtle at first, then clearer, the men stepping away, their focus no longer on control, but on leaving. The engine hum faded as the vehicle pulled off, slow, deliberate, disappearing into the night as if it had never belonged there. Silence settled in its place, deeper now, heavier, earned. Ethan did not move right away. Neither did the woman. For a few seconds, the world felt still again, but this time, not from fear, from release. Then Ethan bent slightly, picked up the crumpled paper bag from the ground, and brushed it off with the same quiet care he had shown everything else. He glanced at her once more, his voice soft, almost ordinary. Are you okay? And somehow, That simple question carried more weight than everything that had come before. She did not answer right away. The question lingered in the air, simple, direct, almost too ordinary for what had just happened, and that was exactly why it reached her in a way nothing else had. Her breath steadied, her shoulders relaxed just slightly, and for the first time since the night had shifted, she looked at him not as a stranger, not as a passerby, but as someone she could not quite place within the world she understood. "I am," she said finally, her voice softer now, stripped of the authority it had carried before, revealing something more human beneath it. Ethan nodded once, as if that was all he needed to hear, as if the moment was already complete for him. He did not step closer. He did not ask another question. Instead, he glanced briefly down the street, the same quiet awareness returning, scanning, confirming that what had left was truly gone. The city resumed around them in small, hesitant ways, a car passing in the distance, a door closing somewhere across the block, the faint echo of life continuing as if nothing unusual had taken place. "You should not be alone out here," Ethan said, not as a warning, but as a simple observation. She let out a small breath, almost a laugh, though it carried no humor. "That is usually not a problem for me," she replied, then paused, as if reconsidering her own words. At least it was not. Ethan studied her for a moment, not intrusively, just enough to understand what needed to be understood. "Do you have someone you can call?" he asked. She hesitated, her eyes shifting slightly, calculating, weighing options that normally came easily to her. "Yes," she said, though it sounded less certain than she intended. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a phone, older, slightly worn, the kind that had seen years of careful use. He held it out to her without ceremony. "Use mine," he said. She looked at the phone, then back at him, a flicker of something crossing her expression, surprise, perhaps, or something closer to disbelief. "You are not even going to ask who I am?" she said. Ethan gave a small, almost amused shake of his head. "No," he answered. Another pause settled between them, but this one felt different, lighter, as if the weight of the night had begun to lift. She accepted the phone slowly, her fingers brushing against it with care, as if it represented more than just a way to make a call. For a moment, she simply held it, looking at the screen without dialing. "Most people would have asked," she said quietly. Ethan shrugged slightly. "Most people walked away." The words landed gently, but they stayed. She looked at him again, longer this time, trying to understand the kind of man who could stand in a moment like that, and then return to something as simple as offering a phone without expectation, without curiosity, without needing anything in return. "What is your name?" she asked. Ethan hesitated for just a fraction of a second, as if names did not matter much to him, then answered simply, "Ethan." She nodded, almost to herself, committing it to memory in a way that felt intentional. "Ethan," she repeated softly. Then she looked down at the phone again, her thumb hovering over the screen, but instead of dialing, she lowered it slightly. "Thank you," she said, the words clear, steady, and genuine. Ethan met her gaze briefly, then looked away, as if the gratitude made him slightly uncomfortable. "You are welcome," he replied. The streetlight flickered once more, but this time, the darkness it cast did not feel uncertain. It felt calm, and in that quiet space between them, something unseen began to take shape, not loud, not immediate, but certain, like a story that had just started, even though neither of them knew how far it would go. She did not make the call right away. Instead, she stood there, holding the phone in both hands, as if the act of dialing would pull her back into a world that suddenly felt distant, controlled, and far too loud compared to the quiet that surrounded her now. The street was still, the kind of stillness that did not come from emptiness, but from something having just passed through and changed the air. Ethan waited, not impatiently, not expectantly, just present, like he had nowhere else he needed to be in that exact moment. "You should probably call them," he said gently, nodding toward the phone, his voice steady, practical. She looked up at him again, her eyes sharper now, clearer, as if she had begun to gather herself piece by piece. "I will," she replied, though her tone carried hesitation, not fear, but something closer to reluctance, like she understood that once she made that call, everything would return to what it had been before, the structure, the control, the expectations. It is just, she paused, searching for words she was not used to needing. Ethan did not fill the silence. He simply watched, giving her space to finish. It is quieter here, she said finally, almost to herself. Ethan gave a small nod, understanding more than he explained. Quiet can be a good thing, he said. She let out a slow breath, then glanced down at the phone again, her thumb finally moving, dialing a number she clearly knew by heart. The line rang once, twice. On the third ring, her posture shifted, her voice returning, not the same as before, but closer. It is me, she said, calm, controlled, direct. A pause. Then, I am fine. Another pause, longer this time, as whoever was on the other end spoke quickly, urgently. Her gaze flickered briefly toward Ethan, then away again. No, she added, I am not alone. She listened, her expression tightening slightly, then softening, then settling somewhere in between. Send someone, she said. Yes. Now. She ended the call without another word, lowering the phone slowly as the weight of what she had just done settled back onto her shoulders. The world she belonged to was already moving again, fast, efficient, relentless. She handed the phone back to Ethan carefully. They are on their way, she said. Ethan took it, slipping it back into his jacket with the same quiet motion. Good, he replied. A few seconds passed. The faint sound of distant sirens began to rise, far off, but coming closer, cutting through the calm like a reminder that the quiet never lasted forever. She heard it too. Her eyes shifted down the street, then back to Ethan. You should go, she said softly. Before they get here. Ethan tilted his head slightly. Why, he asked. She hesitated, then answered honestly. Because they will ask questions, she said. A lot of them. Ethan considered that for a moment, then gave a small, almost knowing smile. They always do, he said. Another brief silence followed, but this one felt different, more personal, like time was narrowing before something inevitable arrived. She took a step closer, not enough to break the space between them completely, but enough to make the moment feel intentional. You really do not want to know who I am? She asked again, this time more directly. Ethan looked at her, really looked this time, not at her coat, not at her posture, not at the presence she carried, but at the person standing in front of him. Then he shook his head once more. No, he said. She studied him, searching for something that was not there, no curiosity, no expectation, no calculation. Just calm, just choice. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder now, lights beginning to flicker faintly at the far end of the street. She exhaled slowly, then gave a small nod, as if accepting something she had not planned to accept tonight. Then I guess, she said quietly, you will find out anyway. Ethan did not respond. He simply stepped back half a pace, giving her space again, the same way he had given her space from the beginning. And as the first beams of flashing lights touched the edge of the street, she realized something she had not expected, that the man who asked for nothing might be the one person she would not be able to forget. The first vehicle turned the corner slowly, its headlights cutting across the pavement in long, clean beams, followed by another, and then another, each one moving with purpose, controlled, precise, like a system that had already rehearsed this moment before it arrived. The flashing lights painted the buildings in alternating shades of red and blue, but there was no chaos in their movement, no shouting, no confusion, only quiet efficiency as doors opened and figures stepped out, dressed in dark suits, their posture alert, their attention fixed immediately on the woman. Ma'am, one of them called, his voice steady but urgent, closing the distance with quick, measured steps. She did not move right away. Her eyes remained on Ethan for just a second longer, as if anchoring herself to something that existed outside the world that was now. Rushing back toward her. I am here, she said finally, turning toward the approaching group. The man reached her, scanning her quickly, not intrusively, but thoroughly, confirming what he needed to confirm. Are you hurt? He asked. She shook her head. No. Another man stepped forward, speaking into a small device at his collar, his words low, efficient, relaying information that moved faster than sound. The scene filled, but it did not overwhelm. It organized itself around her. And yet, in the middle of all that control, her gaze drifted back, just once, searching for the one person who did not belong to any of it. Ethan was already stepping away. Not quickly, not quietly, just leaving. No announcement. No hesitation. He picked up his pace slightly, his boots moving against the pavement with soft, steady rhythm, blending into the ordinary flow of the night, as if that was where he had always belonged. "Wait," she called out, the words slipping out before she could stop it. The men around her paused, their attention shifting instantly, alert, reactive. Ethan stopped, but he did not turn immediately. He stood there for a second, his back to her, as if deciding whether the moment required anything more from him. Then he turned slowly. The distance between them felt different now, filled with people, with light, with expectation. "What is your last name?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough to reach him, but not enough to draw unnecessary attention. Ethan considered the question, just for a moment, then gave a small shake of his head. "It does not matter," he said. One of the men near her frowned slightly, stepping forward. "Sir, we are going to need you to stay here," he said, professional, controlled. Ethan glanced at him briefly, then back at her. "You are safe," he said simply, as if that answered everything. The man opened his mouth to respond, but she raised her hand slightly, stopping him without looking away from Ethan. "Let him go," she said. Her tone had returned, not the sharp edge from before, but something quieter, more deliberate, the kind of authority that did not need to prove itself. The man hesitated, then nodded once, stepping back. Ethan gave a small nod in return, almost like a silent acknowledgement, then turned again, continuing down the street without looking back. The sound of his footsteps faded, gradually, swallowed by distance, by movement, by everything else reclaiming the night. She watched until he disappeared completely, until there was nothing left to see, only the memory of someone who had stepped into her world without asking for anything from it. "Who was that?" one of the men asked quietly. She did not answer right away. Her eyes remained fixed on the empty space where he had been, her expression unreadable for a moment, then softer than anyone there had ever seen it. "Someone," she said finally, "who did not need to be known." And in that moment, surrounded by power, protection, and everything she had built, she realized something unexpected, that the one man who walked away without a name had just become the one person she needed to find. By the time the city fully woke up, the story had already begun to move without him. It appeared first as a brief alert on a local news station, then a headline, then a segment replayed every 30 minutes, each version slightly more polished than the last. A high-profile executive narrowly avoided an incident late the previous night. Authorities confirmed she was unharmed. Details remained limited, but there was one element they could not explain, one piece of the story that refused to stay quiet. A witness, unidentified, calm, gone before anyone could ask his name. In a glass-walled office 30 floors above the street where it had all happened, Victoria Hayes stood still, watching the screen as the footage looped again, the angle grainy, the lighting imperfect, but the presence unmistakable. The camera had caught only fragments, a silhouette stepping forward, a pause, a shift, then stillness where there should have been chaos. "Zoom in," she said. A man beside her tapped the screen, enlarging the frame, but it did not reveal much more, just a clearer outline, the posture, the way he stood, balanced, composed, as if nothing around him could rush him into becoming something else. "That is him," she said quietly. "That is the man. We are still working on identification." Another voice replied, professional, careful. "No records yet. No clear facial capture." Victoria did not respond immediately. She watched the screen a moment longer, then turned away, walking slowly across the office, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, each step measured, deliberate. "Then we are not looking hard enough," she said. Across the city, in a small kitchen where the paint had begun to fade near the corners, and the morning light slipped in through a slightly crooked set of blinds, Ethan poured coffee into a chipped mug, the steam rising in thin, quiet curls. The television in the corner was on, low volume, just enough to fill the silence with something familiar. He did not turn toward it at first. He did not need to. "Authorities are still searching for the man who intervened," the reporter said, her voice smooth, practiced, described only as a civilian, possibly with prior training. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down gently. From the hallway, small footsteps approached, soft, uneven, the sound of someone still waking up. "Daddy," a young voice called. Ethan turned, his expression softening instantly. "I am in here," he replied. A little girl appeared at the doorway, her hair slightly tangled, her eyes still heavy with sleep. "You came home late," she said, rubbing one eye. Ethan crouched down slightly, meeting her at her level. "I did," he said, "but I am here now." She nodded, satisfied with that answer, then glanced toward the television, where the same footage flickered again. "Is that a movie?" she asked. Ethan followed her gaze briefly, then shook his head. "No," he said gently. "Just the news." She studied the screen for a second, then looked back at him. "It looks important," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "Not everything that looks important is," he replied. Back in the tower, Victoria stood at the edge of her desk, her hands resting lightly against the surface as her team moved around her, gathering information, building timelines, connecting details that all pointed in one direction, towards someone who did not want to be found. "We have traffic cameras within a half-mile radius," one of them said. "We are pulling footage now." Victoria nodded once, her eyes focused, determined, but underneath that, something quieter had taken root, something that did not feel like business, or strategy, or control. "Find him," she said. A pause. Then, more softly, more personally, "Not because we need to know, because he chose not to be known." And in two very different places, under two very different lights, the same truth settled in. That one man's quiet decision had begun to move a world that was not used to being changed by silence. By midday, the search had stopped being routine and started becoming intentional. Screens across the top floor displayed maps, timestamps, blurred figures moving through intersections, each frame paused, rewound, analyzed. "We have him here," one analyst said, pointing to a grainy clip from a traffic camera 2 blocks away, the timestamp just minutes after the incident. A figure walked alone, steady pace, head slightly down, not hiding, not rushing, just moving like he had somewhere real to be. "Enhance that," another voice added, but the result did not reveal much more than what they already knew. Average height, worn jacket, unremarkable, the kind of man 100 people could pass in a single hour without remembering. Victoria stood behind them, arms folded loosely, her gaze fixed not on the screen, but on the way the man carried himself within it. "Pause it," she said. The image froze. "Right there." The room quieted slightly. "He is not avoiding the cameras," she continued. "He just does not care that they are there." No one responded, but several nodded subtly, recognizing the difference. This was not someone trying to disappear. This was someone who had never needed to be seen. "Run facial reconstruction anyway," one of the team suggested. "Cross-reference with local employment records, public transit, anything within a 5-mile radius." Victoria did not look at them. "Start closer," she said. "People like him do not travel far at that hour." He was going home. Across the city, the morning had settled into something quieter. Ethan stood at the sink, rinsing a plate slowly, the water running in a steady stream, his movements unhurried, familiar. His daughter sat at the small table behind him, swinging her legs gently, coloring with careful concentration, her crayons spread out in uneven rows. The television was off now. The room held its own silence. "Daddy," she said, without looking up. "Yes." "If someone helps you," she continued, choosing her words carefully, "are you supposed to help them back?" Ethan turned off the water, drying his hands on a towel before answering. "Sometimes," he said, "but not always the way people expect." She paused, considering that, then looked up at him. "What if they do not want anything?" Ethan smiled faintly, walking over and kneeling beside her chair. "Then you respect that," he said gently. "Helping is not a trade. It is a choice." She nodded slowly, as if storing that somewhere important, then returned to her drawing. A few miles away, inside a quiet conference room lined with glass and light, Victoria stood alone for a moment, the screens dimmed now, the search still running in the background. She held a printed still frame in her hand, the same image paused earlier, the outline of a man who had stepped into her life without warning and left without explanation. She studied it again, not for detail, but for meaning. Then she reached for her phone. "Expand the search," she said when the line connected. "Not just cameras. Local schools, grocery stores, small neighborhoods, places where people know each other." A pause. "And stop treating him like a suspect." Her voice softened, just slightly. "He is not hiding. He is living. She ended the call and set the photo down carefully on the table, her fingers lingering for just a second longer than necessary. Outside, the city moved as it always did, fast, loud, relentless. But somewhere within it, unnoticed by most, two very different lives were beginning to move toward each other, not by force, not by urgency, but by something quieter, something that did not rush, because it did not need to. And for the first time in a long time, Victoria Hayes allowed herself to step away from control, just enough to follow something she could not yet define, but already knew she would not ignore. It was not a boardroom she chose, and it was not announced. No press, no headlines, no carefully arranged moment designed to control the narrative. Just a quiet afternoon, sunlight falling across a narrow street lined with small storefronts, the kind of place that did not expect anything extraordinary to happen. A black car stopped at the corner, engine humming softly before going still. The door opened, and Victoria stepped out alone. No entourage followed. No one rushed to her side. She closed the door gently, her eyes scanning the street, not with authority, but with intent. He is here, she said quietly to herself, more a feeling than a fact. Inside a modest grocery store, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the air carried the familiar scent of fresh bread and ground coffee. Ethan stood near the counter, a small basket in his hand, his daughter beside him pointing at something on a lower shelf. "Can we get this?" she asked, holding up a box of cookies with careful hope. Ethan glanced at it, then at her, a soft smile forming. "Just one box," he said. She nodded quickly, satisfied, placing it into the basket like it mattered more than anything else. The bell above the door chimed lightly as it opened. Neither of them looked up right away. Victoria stepped inside, the sound of the outside world fading behind her as the door closed. For a moment, she simply stood there, adjusting to the stillness, to the ordinary rhythm of a place that did not know her name. Then she saw him, not on a screen, not in a frame, just there, simple, real. She walked forward slowly, her steps measured, not wanting to interrupt something she did not fully understand. Ethan turned slightly as if sensing movement, his eyes lifting, and for a brief second, the world aligned again exactly where it had left off. No surprise, no tension, just recognition. "You found me," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. Victoria stopped a few feet away, a small breath escaping her as if she had been holding it longer than she realized. "You did not make it difficult," she replied. A pause followed, soft, unforced. His daughter looked between them, curious, sensing something without knowing what. "Daddy?" she asked quietly. Ethan glanced down at her, then back at Victoria. "This is a friend," he said gently, choosing the word without hesitation. Victoria's expression shifted, something warmer, something unexpected. "I hope so," she said. The cashier behind the counter glanced up briefly, then returned to scanning items, unaware that anything beyond the ordinary was unfolding just a few feet away. Victoria stepped closer, but not too close, respecting the space he had always kept. "I came to thank you," she said. Ethan shook his head lightly. "You already did," he replied. "No," she said, more firmly this time, though her tone remained soft. "I said the words. That is not the same." Ethan studied her for a moment, then asked quietly, "What is?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "Understanding why you did it," she said. The store hummed quietly around them, the sound of a refrigerator unit clicking on, the faint rustle of paper bags, the rhythm of everyday life continuing without pause. Ethan looked down at his daughter, then back at Victoria. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. She held his gaze, searching for more, but there was nothing hidden behind it. No deeper explanation, no need to justify. Just truth. A silence followed, not empty, but full, stretching gently between them. The kind of silence that did not demand to be filled. The cashier finished ringing up the items, placing them into a bag. Ethan reached for his wallet, paying without rush, then picked up the bag with one hand, his daughter's hand with the other. "Take care," he said, nodding once to Victoria. "No expectation, no invitation, just respect." He turned and walked toward the door. Victoria did not stop him. She did not call out. She simply watched, her eyes steady, her expression quiet, as he stepped out into the sunlight and disappeared into the same world he had always belonged to. And for the first time in a long time, surrounded by everything she had built, everything she controlled, Victoria Hayes stood completely still, saying nothing, because some moments did not need words, they needed silence to be understood.